Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporon. I am your host, Mindy. A friend of mine told me in early 2018 that she saw a vision of me with a microphone in front of me. I laughed at the time and said, "I don't see any microphones in my future." Less than a year later, I was recording my first podcast on this show. I'm not going to say, "I hope you enjoy this podcast." My podcast is not truly meant to be enjoyed. Real grief, real healing is just that, real and raw. I provide you an opportunity to learn and share in the grief others are experiencing, and then we share how they are healing or perhaps not. Grief changes each of us in some way. Many of my guests have been encouraged to open new businesses, start foundations, and in general, work to make the world around us a better place. Grief is universal. How we decide to move onward, seeking healing, is individual. A significant part of my healing comes through the courageous kindness actions of others. As you listen to my podcasts, you will hear how you can give and receive courageous kindness too. Together, we are better.
Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporon, taking a deep dive into the reality of the difficulty grief brings and offering insight into the healing available to each of us. Today, episode 18, Rabbi Jeffrey Myers on trust, friendship, and kindness. And now your host, Mindy Corporon.
Hi friends, it's Mindy Corporon. Thank you for joining me today for my podcast. I have a very interesting and thoughtful guest with me today. My guest today is a man of God. He is a husband, a father, a cantor, a rabbi, a man of great faith and character. Rabbi Jeffrey Myers is also a victim, a witness, and a survivor of the worst massacre in Jewish history. He was the first call to 911 on October 27th, 2018. 11 people lost their lives and 6 were wounded during Shabbat services that morning. The Tree of Life Synagogue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was attacked. Rabbi Myers has been given a mission from God. He calls it the H word. The word hate is considered a 4-letter word and an obscenity, and he will no longer use it, and neither will I. He has added the H word to the collection of obscene words, and he says that extreme words lead to extreme actions. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about the massacre Rabbi witnessed, his grief, and his real healing. Welcome, Rabbi Myers.
Thank you, Mindy. Good to be with you today.
Thank you. So we're recording in early September, and it actually is September 1. We are recording in early September, and Rosh Hashanah is upon us and upon you. I am Christian and you are Jewish and a rabbi leading a synagogue. So I would like to ask you first, what are you doing and how are you planning Rosh Hashanah this year?
This will probably be the most complicated Rosh Hashanah service for me ever. I've been on a pulpit as a professional for 36 years. I was a boy soprano in choirs, so I've been engaged in our Holy Day services for almost all of my life. The reason I think this is more complicated is simply because of the lack of human contact in one space. In that absence, since we can't make that up in any way, shape, or form, and we're going to be just virtually meeting with each other, how to bring meaning into people's homes, how to take the holiness of the space that we're in and help people transform some space in their homes into also a small sanctuary. That's really challenging. You can't just lay in bed in your pajamas with your laptop on your belly, cup of coffee, and say, "Okay, Rabbi, it's Rosh Hashanah, move me." It doesn't work that way. It can't.
And so it sounds like you're going to be asking your congregation to come together as a team and work with you and to find the Holy Spirit together, not just expect you to push it through the Ethernet.
Well, I'd certainly like to see that it's a partnership and that people recognize that you can't put 100% of the responsibility solely on me and the liturgy to move you. And I've compared it to, you'll forgive the metaphor, but I live here in Pittsburgh, to preparing for a Steelers football game. You get excited about it all week. You're looking forward to it. You dress in the garb. You even don't mind sitting through traffic to get to your parking spot. You go to your reserved seats. You're engaged throughout the course of the game. You stand up and cheer when a great play occurs. To take some of what that's about and now utilize that to get ready for the holy days. Yeah, that's a big ask. But that's what I'm asking people to think about.
Okay, so I'm a Chiefs fan, a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and we do tailgating very, very well. So it sounds to me like you were asking your congregation to be prepared for tailgating for God.
I love that phrase. I'm going to use it somehow. But yeah,
That's great. That's great. Well, good luck to you. I'll be thinking about you. I don't do a 100% job of remembering all the Jewish holidays, but I do focus on it much more now since the murders of my dad and son and Terry Lamano, and that's what the Faith Always Wins Foundation focuses on. And 7 days make a ripple change the world. So I'm much more aware of the holy days and what you have going on, and I know that that because of this year, because of COVID, that'll be a little bit more difficult. So we'll be praying for you on that.
thank you.
So, Rabbi Myers, who are New Light Congregation and Congregation Dor Hadash, and how are they associated with the Tree of Life Synagogue?
Over time, as synagogue populations change and demographics occur, we grow, we shrink. That's the lifespan of I think, all houses of worship. So we found as the Tree of Life was in that period of shrinkage that we reached out to partners to say, why don't we find some ways to collaborate, to share space, obviously from an economic point of view, just to cut our costs. And so over a period of time, we welcomed Dor Hadash, which was a Reconstructionist congregation, into our building. And then later on, New Light congregations sold their building and moved into our building as well. So we were housing, in total between Tree of Life and 3 synagogues were worshiping in the same building, frequently at the same time. The building was sufficiently large enough to accommodate all 3 congregations, that they could have their own separate worship spaces. There were occasions when we would worship together or celebrate together or study together, but yet we could all work in one space and make it work.
And so, I mean, I appreciate that. I wasn't sure if they were of the Jewish faith, so they are other. They're Jewish faith. They're other synagogues. It's not that neither of them are of a different faith right now.
Correct.
Okay. Is that anything that your synagogue would do? Would you welcome, if you were in a facility at the time, would you all welcome a church or a mosque or any people of other faith to share your space with you?
We're open to any and all discussions of the most effective way to utilize our resources. Certainly, we'd want to reach out to partners that we share common interests, common goals, to be able to work together, for example, to make a better world, to reach out with any and all partners who want to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So those 2 congregations, both synagogues, were part of, and still are, but were physically part of the facility in 2018, and they took part in the same massacre that you were there for, and that happened on October 27th, 2018. So, can you tell us now about your experience and about everyone's experience, but obviously it's yours, it's your words, it's what happened to you in particular when that massacre started happening.
Well, I can share some information with you, but to understand as well, the trial has not occurred yet. So because of that, the U.S. Attorney has asked that we not speak about these specifics that one might be called to testify about, so that there aren't different versions of one's testimony out there simultaneously. So I can't go into all of the great details. I mean, there's enough public information out there, but I can say the morning started like a typical Shabbat, meaning Saturday morning. All would be as one would expect. We were beginning our services. New Light was beginning theirs in their space, Dor Chadash in their space. When shortly after we had begun with just a few moments, I initially thought what I heard was one of the metal coat racks being pulled over. And the first thought that came to mind is, oh no, maybe one of our seniors grabbed it or something and pulled it over or something like that. However, shortly thereafter, it was clear to me, and I can't tell you why, but it was that it was not the sound of a coat rack. It was the sound of gunfire. I can't tell you why I knew that, because it doesn't sound like it does on TV, but it is a sound that I'll never forget. At that point, there were people seated closer to the front of the sanctuary where I was leading the services. Quickly tried the best I could to usher them out through the doors on the front side of our sanctuary. There are the people sitting in the back of the sanctuary, mostly most of the elders who like to come early, so they have their favorite seats. As they came back and took a look, and hearing the sounds going on, I recognized at that time that the distance to the back of the sanctuary was so great that there was nothing I could do at that point. That it's very possible, if I'm right, I'll be one of the victims. I told the people to just drop to the floor and be quiet. And then I left, knowing full well that I'm expecting a bad outcome.
Did your faith weaken after the massacre?
No, actually, it grew stronger. Yeah, in the ensuing days, I would say the ensuing month, easy as a blur. I could call literally the remaining days of October and all of November one long day to me, because that's how it felt. Initially, it was really very difficult to pray. As someone who regularly has been leading services for most of their life, I had the prayer book in front of me. I couldn't get the words out. They just wouldn't come, as though my prayer voice had just left. It did return, fortunately, and it returned in an interesting way when I'm trying to find the right words to say. The first phrase that came to mind in just trying to get some inspiration and words were the opening verses of Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the heavens. From where will my help come? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. That helped me gradually restore my prayer voice. And ever since that day, I've been starting my regular prayer routine with the recitation of that psalm. So that's 22 months later. And I start every morning with that. And that's how I begin my conversation with God and say, okay, God, what do you need me to do today? Help inspire me to say the right things. And if you're not too busy, you can even put the words in the right order. That'd be really appreciated. And that's my routine every day since.
Hmm. I love that. I want to share one funny anecdote about the fact that you mentioned that the parishioners that had been coming for a long time, that they sat in their favorite seats. That happens everywhere. That happens in church. It happens everywhere, and I always hear people talking about that. It happens even in meetings that are 2 days. If someone went to a meeting, even if it's a whole day long, and people will pick a seat and then they leave for lunch, they will come back expecting
Yeah.
that is the seat, that is their seat. So I thought that's humorous that you mentioned that. And then I wanna talk about you being a cantor. So when you said I heard you say you couldn't pray verbally. So I'm curious about, was the prayer in your head? Were you okay thinking it? But I guess it's your responsibility to pray out loud and also to sing the prayer. So do you sing the prayers every single day in your home?
Well, now we do because of the pandemic. Our prayers are virtual, but prior to that, we would have been in person every morning. Um, but no, it wasn't that it just couldn't come out of my mouth. It couldn't come out of my head.
Okay.
Just couldn't.
There. Okay. Would you would you break into cantering for us? Can you share with that with me?
Sure, why don't I sing a little bit of something that'll be coming up that I'd be singing. We have a service this Saturday evening before Rosh Hashanah. It's called Slichot, which means prayers of forgiveness. Then begin a week where, added to our regular prayers, in like a pre-prayer service, are a series of petitions to God asking forgiveness. Um, the closest thing that I think in Christianity you'd have it would be midnight mass. In many congregations, it's done at midnight. Some even do it at 1 a.m. because the time zone, it's not really midnight. If you're in the Eastern time zone, it's really Eastern daylight time, which is 1 hour off. So many do it at 1 a.m. Anyway, I'll sing a little bit of um, a collaborative piece that I sing to you, my Lord, you're my rock. So I'll just sing an opening verse or two of that. Lecho nerhanena, neranena ladonai. Nariya letzor yishenu, nekad mafanav betoda. Izmirat nariyalo.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Okay, I have another question. I'm just thinking through it. There were 11 funerals, and 7 of which you officiated.
Correct.
From where did you draw the strength and the fortitude for each of those?
From God. I
Somehow,
can't,
I think that was the answer.
I can't say it was just me because the batteries will run down, and I don't know where they could be recharged. It came from God. It's not one of those answerables. God gave me the strength to get through it. I didn't write a word down. I sort of felt embarrassed to say that I didn't write one word of any eulogy. God inspired me what to say, and it came from my heart. Um, and I was, upon reflection, surprised because I'd only been there a little more than a year. So you would think, okay, that's not enough time to really get to know people deeply and well. I spoke with the families, took a note here or there, but the inspiration just came. And I just hope that my words were able to offer some comfort, ease some pain, because you can't answer the unanswerable in this regard.
From where does the trust come from? When did you learn to trust God and to trust your feelings that God would be there for you?
I can't give you like a starting date to say it began on such and such a date. I just think it just developed over my life. I didn't decide to become a Jewish clergy and then develop the faith. The faith had been there before. I just think it's was nurtured in the right ways growing up as a child, that it continued to blossom and grow throughout my life. It continues to this day.
And you listen to it. I love that you listen to it. So who mentored you? Who poured into your life that showed you how to listen and how to trust?
I've had some important stepping stones, sort of guides along the way. Certainly my parents, because if my parents didn't feel it was important to bring me to synagogue, I would have not been engaged as I am now, I would say. But beyond that, I've had mentors and teachers I've been lucky to be part with throughout the course of my life. Sometimes you don't recognize how meaningful a person is in your life until years later, with maturity, you can look back and see, wow, that was really an important person in my life. And for some of them that are still alive, I've over the years, whether I've run into them accidentally or on purpose, communicated and said, you were an important part of my life and who I am now. And here's what you did. And you should just know that I don't know how many other people may have said this to you, but you impacted my life positively. And I want to thank you for that.
I love that. I love too that that's as a call to action for my listeners to think about people that have poured into them and to take time to go and say thank you. I've thought about that on birthdays. I tend to think about that during my birthday time period about thanking people. So that's a good idea.
And I could give another short story about that. My wife, who is a teacher, she'd been over the course of the summer working via Zoom with a student. And the last session before the family moved, the student, they'd been working on stories and comprehension, etc. The student wanted to write a story. So the student wrote a story and also just some pictures for it. And I didn't know how they were going to affect to be able to see this because it wasn't an online document. And then one evening within the past week, for whatever reason, went outside to just check on the chairs, because usually I leave the chairs on our porch tilted, so if it rains, they dry a little quicker. Out there is an orchid, and inside this beautiful orchid is a paper. I take it and bring it inside, and it's a story, and I give it to my wife, and I showed it to her. This wonderful story that the student had written, and the lovely note the student wrote on the back. And my wife, you could see the little weepiness. And I said to her, that's why you do this, because you never know who you're going to impact. Here's one kid that you impacted. So when you think of all the other bad days you have or down moments, pause a moment and think of this one and say, wow, I impacted that kid and how blessed I am.
Thank you. That's a great story to share. Thank you. So from the massacre, good things have occurred. I've seen good things. I've read about them, and you and I chatted about them earlier, that good things have occurred from the massacre. And they're like flowers kind of blooming in the mud. You don't expect them to happen, and then they appear. And you have stated previously in video and in written word that from this massacre, God has given you a mission to eliminate a word from our vocabulary. And I stated this word in our introduction, but I'm not going to state it again. It's called the H word. And it's not to be repeated because you don't want it repeated, and I want to respect that. And that's what you're trying to teach people. So can you give us an indication of at what moment or moments did you feel that God laid this on your heart to have this mission?
I would say the first realization of mission was, and I can't give an exact day, but shortly thereafter, October 27th, I came to a realization that I'm alive, I survived, because God literally said to me, Jeffrey, it's not your time yet, I don't want you. I have something for you to do. And that's why I sent you to Pittsburgh. And I do believe that, because I came to Pittsburgh the evening of July 31st, 2017. So I'd only been here barely more than a year. I had no idea where Pittsburgh was before I came here. I'm from the East Coast. So for me, Pittsburgh is part of that image of that drawing from the New Yorker that shows the East Coast. And then the middle United States is just blank. And then there's LA. So I know where Pittsburgh was. But that God wanted me to be here. And it's not that I'm claiming that God planned this massacre. No, God doesn't plan massacres. God's the one we turn to in times like this to give us hope and strength. I don't believe for one moment that God's in a divine control room, pushing buttons, turning knobs, and creating disasters, massacres, pandemics. That's not my God. But to go a little further into your question of that moment for the H word, there have been nonstop interviews with media of all sorts. And I think it was the first Friday in November of 2018, the city of Pittsburgh held what they called a rally. It was held at a vigil. Was it a vigil or a rally? A rally at Point State Park. Point State Park is at the confluence of the three rivers that flow through Pittsburgh. The Allegheny, the Monongahela, merged to form the Ohio. So right at that confluence is Point State Park. And I was asked to speak. Tom Hanks was there. He was in town because he was filming the film about Mr. Rogers. So he came out on the stage with Joanne Rogers, the widow, who was a lovely, lovely woman. Other celebrities were there, native to Pittsburgh, from all walks of life. I was asked to say a few words closer to the end. Rainy, messy day. And I'm thinking, what can I add at this point that I've not said? And I don't know where it came from. This idea, again, a divine piece of inspiration that, and I'll say it once, the word hate is a 4-letter obscenity. When we use it, it becomes a severe piece of language. It leads to serious emotional moments, usually negative, frequently violent. And we need to tone down our language. We need to restore civil discourse. There's too much uncivil discourse in our country. And if we could just tone it down a little bit and don't use the H word and just say, if you don't like something, just say, I don't like it, which is just a lot less severe than saying I H it. And that was the origin of it. So I took a pledge there. And I invited people right there as I raised my hand and said, I take a pledge. I will not use that word, and invite people to do the same. It seems simplistic, but actually it's really hard. If you think about it, I see it all the time. People in a moment, like I remember I was in a supermarket shopping lot, and a woman was trying to push one of the carts, and one of the wheels stuck and isn't working right. So what's the first thing you're going to say with that? I H when that happens, right? So we use it all the time. And my point was, I get it. I understand that. If we make a conscious choice to remove serious verb with serious consequences, we can tone down our behavior and we can just ease off a little bit. That goes a long way towards restoring civil discourse. Um, so it's just a modest, easy attempt to try to make a bit of change. Will it create an entire movement? I don't think so. Will people be wearing buttons with an H with a red diagonal through it sort of moment? No, I don't expect that any of that's going to happen. I think it's just a function of I'm making a statement about what I think about language and where we need to go. If you agree with me, you're most warmly welcome to join me in it.
Right. I love that. And I would recommend that maybe it's part of a fundraiser for the Tree of Life Synagogue or for something that you want it to be for. And you could have t-shirts made up that have the H with the, circle and the red, slash through it. And yeah, maybe that could be a fundraiser that you could do for something. Maybe it's for the families, maybe it's for a foundation that's been created. I have been in touch with the woman who created Seder for Two. So she's reached out to Faith Always Wins, and we will most likely be collaborating in 2021. So I know other good things have happened from the massacre, and I know that that's one thing that you mentioned to me. I want to end with talking about a new friend of yours, and he's not new to you, but he's new in your life. And I want to ask all these questions at the same time. So I'm going to ask, who is Pastor Eric Manning to you? And have you had cross-faith relationships previously? And have you had cross-racial relationships previously?
Yes, yes, and yes. I've, since the earliest days in my service as a clergy person, I've always sought out and tried to craft relationships with leaders of other faiths because I think that to create a better society, it's always easy to identify our differences. Those seem to stand out. Why is it so hard to identify that we have so much more in common? And we take our commonalities and we can recognize the potential is there to do so much good because of our commonalities. So I've always been engaged in interfaith relations wherever I've served with any and all faiths, no exceptions. So that's been a constant part of what I've done my entire professional life. I saw no reason to change that coming to Pittsburgh. The difference is, when you move to a brand new community, totally outside the place that you're familiar with, it takes time to just create these connections, be social connections or professional connections. So to have an immediate cadre of professional colleagues, just they don't fall from heaven in your lap, and there they are, and all the doors are open. But October 27th is what happened. They all fell in my lap as they all opened their doors and said, "We're here. If you need a space to pray, we're here. If you need a place to meet, if you need help, whatever it is, we're here." So it kind of accelerated that opportunity to grow relationships, and that's what I'm continuing to try to do, is just grow those relationships because we have so much in common, so much that we all want to accomplish that's identical. So there's a benefit to working together. And when the people that are your parishioners see that, that encourages them to want to step forward. But they're not going to step forward frequently on their own, but they're going to wait to see, okay, who's going to lead? And to me, I think that's part of my responsibility as a faith leader, is to lead. So it's been a regular part of my life. Pastor Eric Manning, on the other hand, is a different story because he's from Charleston. I was sitting on my sofa probably 3 or 4 days after the massacre, I had my cell phone in my hand and just scrolling through, I kid you not, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of emails. And when you scroll through emails, it's kind of like those one-armed bandits in casinos where the numbers scroll, eventually they stop at some point. Same thing with the emails. You scroll, it stops. It just stopped on his email right in front. And it was like, wow, looking back, that's like a finger of God moment, that it stopped right on his email, because I wasn't reading emails. There were just too many to read. And the essence of his email was he's introducing himself, that he's the pastor of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. And he was reaching out to me and wants to come into town. And I said, oh, just what I need. Another person coming to town amongst so many that I can't keep track. So I responded. I said, thank you. It's really so thoughtful and kind of you. And just so many. In the end, he insisted. So he came into town that Thursday night. So, okay, I'll meet. So we went for breakfast that Friday morning, turned into a 3-hour meeting. I learned from him a really powerful phrase. It's called the ministry of presence. The essence of it is, I'm just there to be there with you. I don't have to say a word. Just know that I'm here with you. And that's why he was there, because he understood, because in June of 2015, a white supremacist entered Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, sat and studied Bible, then rose up and slaughtered 9 people, including Pastor Clement de Pickney, who was the pastor of the church at the time. Pastor Manning was called to serve approximately a year later by the bishop to help repair and heal that congregation. So if there's anyone who understood it, he did, and he came to give his ministry a presence, but he gave far more. And towards the end of our conversation, I had to get ready to prepare because that afternoon was the last of the funerals. And he asked if he could attend. And I said, no, you're not just going to attend. You're going to come with me and sit up with me at the raised platform. You're going to read the 23rd Psalm, and I ask you to offer some words of hope and consolation to our community. So imagine the look on the face of 2,000 people more who were in attendance when a black preacher walks up in front with a white rabbi. They certainly go, well, what's happening here? He sat down. When we began, I got up after an opening psalm. I said to those assembled, I believe in angels. Now, you're probably going to think that this poor man, after what he's been through, he's just totally lost it now. We need to get the people in the white coats to take him away or something. But no, I believe in angels, that God sends angels. God sent an angel to me. Let me introduce you to my angel. His name is Pastor Eric Manning of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. Thus began a warm friendship that continues to this day, that we regularly speak and talk to each other. Because if there are two people who get it, we get it.
Right. I get it. Unfortunately, I get it too. I have very much appreciated our time together. I appreciate you being with us. You have talked to us about prayer. You've talked to us about faith and trusting and mentors and being a mentor and listening and being present. You've taught us so much, and I value your time. I know that you are sought after. And I appreciate that you were willing to come on my podcast and talk with me and share with my listeners as well. And if there's anything that I can do for you, please always let me know, and I will be available to you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, friends, for joining us for this podcast. As I said, we have learned so much. Please take time to send a thank you note, send a card to Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, and I'll be sure and post how to do that in our show notes. So everyone have a wonderful day. Friends, thanks so much for joining me today for this podcast of Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporon. If you want to dive deeper into how you might heal yourself or a friend, please pick up a copy of my book, Healing a Shattered Soul. Published on May 3rd, 2021, you can find my memoir anywhere books are sold. You will also find me in social media channels as Mindy Corporon. Take time to help yourself heal, accepting courageous kindness. Take time to heal another by giving courageous kindness. Together, we are better.
Real Grief, Real Healing is copyright 2021 to 2022, Mindy Corporon, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. This podcast is a production of 818 Studios.